January 20th, 2008. Reno, Nevada was covered in snow that night. The kind of winter cold that makes you want to stay inside where it's warm and safe, where doors are locked and friends are nearby, where nothing bad is supposed to happen. But sometimes, the places we feel safest become the most dangerous. And for 19-year-old Brianna Denison, a night that should have ended with nothing more than a hangover and good memories would instead become something no one could have imagined. Brianna Denison grew up in Reno. Her father died suddenly when she was just 6 years old, a tragedy that brought her closer to her mother, Bridget. They became a team, Bridget would later say, protective of each other, dependent on each other. The bond between them was something her friends noticed immediately. Danielle, who had known Brianna since nursery school, said the mother and daughter were like best friends. They did everything together. And Brianna herself was someone people remembered. The nicest person you could meet, Danielle said. Someone who never missed a birthday, who called everyone she cared about on their special day, whether they were close friends or just acquaintances. After graduating high school, Brianna decided university was her next step. California was calling. It was hard for Bridget to see her daughter leave, but this was the beginning of Brianna's adult life, and she was ready. She enrolled at Santa Barbara City College to study psychology. She wanted to work with children after graduation. She had a boyfriend. She had friends. Life was good. Even though she was no longer living in Reno, she stayed connected to her mother. Pictures, text messages, regular updates about everything she was doing. For Bridget, it was never quite enough to ease the worry. If she had a bad dream about Brianna, she would call her immediately, just to make sure everything was okay. Winter break arrived in January 2008, which meant Brianna was coming home. She and her friends had plans for an exciting weekend, snowboarding during the day, parties at night. On Friday, January 18th, Brianna went to her friend Katie's house. They had been friends since school, and this weekend was about forgetting work and school stress for a while. Katie lived just off the campus of the University of Nevada, Reno, and that's where the group would be staying. According to another friend, Jessica, Friday night had been perfect. They danced, they laughed, and when they got home, they all squeezed into Katie's bed, already looking forward to doing it all again the next day. Saturday, January 19th, Brianna went to her mom's house to do laundry. Then the two of them went to see the new movie, 27 Dresses. Brianna was supposed to go out again that night to a concert, but she wasn't feeling well. She had caught a cold and wasn't sure if she should go. Her mom encouraged her. "You can be sick tomorrow," Bridget told her. "You really like this band." At 9 o'clock that evening, Brianna gave her mom a hug goodbye. Later, she sent a text asking if she should check in when she got back to Katie's. Her mom told her not to worry. She knew Brianna would be at Katie's house, and that felt safe. After the concert, Brianna and Katie met up with Jessica. The three of them jumped on a shuttle bus and headed to the Sands Regency Casino Hotel for another party. Within a couple of hours, Jessica was ready to call it a night. She left to catch a ride home. A man she didn't know was driving an SUV in the parking lot, and she asked if he could give her a lift. He agreed. Jessica would later say it was a bad idea. "I could have probably walked," she said, "but it was freezing, so I just got a ride." Someone was leaving. It was a bad decision, but nothing happened to Jessica that night. She made it home safely. At around 3:30 in the morning, Katie and Brianna got a ride back to the house with a friend. Brianna didn't want to be crammed into Katie's bed again, so she decided to sleep on the sofa instead. The sofa was right next to the glass door, which was never locked. The house had a reputation for being like a hotel. People came and went freely. Brianna and Katie said goodnight at 4 in the morning. At 4:23, Brianna sent a text to her boyfriend in Oregon. Then the house fell silent. Katie and Jessica woke up around 9 o'clock. Jessica described what happened next. "We went out into the kitchen and started making breakfast. The kitchen was right in front of the couch, and Brianna wasn't sleeping there anymore. Katie pointed to the couch and said, 'Where's Brianna?' They figured maybe she was upstairs in one of the empty bedrooms. At first, they didn't think much of it. Katie knocked on the bedroom door she thought Brianna might be in and told her it was time to get up. At 9:45, she tried again. Nothing. She began pounding on the door frantically. Still nothing. Then she realized Brianna wasn't in the house at all. Katie saw Brianna's cell phone on the table. Her shoes were exactly where she had left them. Her purse was there with her ID and money still inside. Everything Brianna owned, her whole life, was still in that house. But Brianna was gone. It was winter in Reno. The temperatures were freezing. Snow covered the ground. There was no way she would have left voluntarily without her phone, without her shoes, without anything. Katie called Brianna's mom. As she waited for Bridget to arrive, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The pillow she had given to Brianna had blood on it, 2 small spots and a small spatter. Katie called Bridget back, hysterically crying. "There's blood on Brianna's pillow," she said. "Do you want me to call the police?" Bridget said yes, and that she would be there as soon as possible. Before long, Brianna's mom, her aunt, and the police had descended on the house. There were no signs of a struggle, but the blanket Brianna had been sleeping with was found in the kitchen. The brown stuffed bear she had been using as an extra pillow was gone. For everyone involved, this was a nightmare unfolding in real time. Lieutenant Robert McDonald was in charge of the Reno Police Department's Detective Division. He was supposed to be off that day, but a call from his colleagues changed everything. Right from the start, he said. It wasn't sounding good. Local search and rescue teams were quickly brought in. Officers began conducting door-to-door inquiries. Everyone who lived in the house was interviewed and ruled out. For the officers, the blood on the pillow was extremely worrying. Based on the evidence they were seeing, this was not someone who had decided to leave voluntarily. This was an abduction. The 3 bloodstains on the pillow were between 1 and 3 inches in size. They were mixed with phlegm, saliva, and mucus. There were also mascara stains. Tests revealed that the blood was Brianna's. An affidavit stated that forensic pathologists were of the opinion that Miss Denison appeared to have suffered an actively bleeding injury in or near her mouth, throat, or nose at the time when her face was being pressed hard against the pillow. The back doorknob was swabbed for DNA because the blanket had been found near it. The swab came back with an unknown male profile. The sheriff's office had a backlog of 3,000 DNA samples waiting to be processed. Within just a few days, the community had raised $150,000 so that these samples could be processed faster. None of them were a match. The DNA of the suspect was also run through the national database. Still no matches. Bridget's home was suddenly filled with people desperate to help. She knew she needed to get as many eyes on her daughter's case as possible, so she went to the media. The case soon made headlines around the country. People began wearing blue ribbons in support of the family. Blue was Brianna's favorite color. As investigators now believed this was a kidnapping, the FBI and 2 investigators from the Center for Missing and Exploited Children were brought in to help. Officers and canine units searched the area. A reward was offered for any information that could help find her. Police wanted to speak to the man who had dropped Jessica off at the house that night. He later came forward, was interviewed, and was ruled out. All indicators pointed to Brianna having been abducted. Police said it was their sincere hope that she would come walking through the door any minute, but the longer it went on, the less likely that became. Sergeant Gerald Rhodes, head of the Regional Sex Offender Notification Unit, said his detectives were conducting interviews with registered sex offenders living within 1 mile of where Brianna had been staying. They also checked the house next door. The man who lived there had something disturbing to tell them. He had been in his living room in the early hours of the morning, around 4:30 or 5, with the lights off. As he sat there, he saw a shadow outside his property. Then someone tried to force open his door. It sounded like someone tried to push on the handle and push the door, he said, but he didn't get up to see who it was. He dismissed the incident, thinking it was just a drunk kid trying to find his way home who had the wrong house. By Monday, January 21st, police dogs and helicopters were out searching. Hundreds of people came out to look for her. They searched on foot through the snow, looking for any sign or clue. Drains were checked. Manhole covers were lifted. Fields, rivers, ditches, everything was being searched. For police, another thing became clear. This did not appear to be this criminal's first time. This was someone who had committed similar crimes before, and they believed it was the same man responsible for 2 sexual attacks that had happened on campus. On November 13, 2007, a 21-year-old student was in a parking lot when she was grabbed from behind and pushed to the ground at gunpoint. He told her not to scream, but she did. It frightened him, and he ran away, apparently dropping a packet of condoms as he fled. On December 16, 2007, in the early hours of the morning, a 22-year-old exchange student was grabbed from behind just outside her home. He covered her nose and mouth, and she lost consciousness after struggling to breathe. When she woke up, she was in a truck. The truck only drove a short distance, and she was sexually assaulted inside the vehicle. He told her not to look at him, and when he took her home, he told her to get out and not look back. She told police he was a white male with hair on his chin and tanned arms. She was able to give details about the truck. The radio was distinctive, with red and blue lights, and on the floor was a baby shoe. Police were able to get a sample of his DNA. Both this victim and the previous one said he had also taken their underwear. Police later discovered that the DNA from both attacks matched the DNA from the doorknob at Katie's house. This was a serial sex offender whose crimes were rapidly escalating. Police also believed that when someone had tried to break into the exchange student's home on another occasion, it was the same man. The student had woken up to hear someone trying to break in through the back door. So much force had been used that the door had bowed outwards. These attacks had all occurred within a radius of just 4 blocks. Now everyone knew the description of the man they were looking for. A white male between the ages of 28 and 40, between 5'6" and 6 feet tall, driving an SUV or an extended cab pickup truck. People were terrified. Sales of weapons increased dramatically. Police said this would be someone unobtrusive, someone who stalked his victims quietly but escalated his violence with each new attack. They firmly believed there would be more victims and encouraged anyone with information to come forward. As the searches continued, volunteers kept going despite their exhaustion. One volunteer said that each day they went back to the command center with a heavy heart, but they were willing to go out the next morning and stay positive for however long it took. The hunt for this man was unlike anything ever conducted in Reno. More than 300 volunteers searched along the Truckee River, including Nevada's First Lady, Dawn Gibbons, who said nobody was going to quit until they found Brianna and brought her home. Her son had gone to school with Brianna. This case felt very close to home for so many people. More than 5,000 tips came in. Over 700 men volunteered to give DNA samples to investigators. Bridget appeared on television, speaking directly to her daughter's abductor. "It's time to give her back," she said. "We miss her and we love her. We know she's hurt and it's time to give her back to us. We need her." February 15th, 2008. 8 miles away from where Brianna had been abducted, Alberto Jimenez was cutting across a vacant lot at work to grab some food. Something caught his eye. Something odd in the brush in a shallow ditch. It was a Christmas tree on its side. Then he saw the socks. As he got closer, he thought it was a mannequin under the tree. Surely it couldn't be anything more sinister than that. But then he saw a wound on the shoulder. He knew it was real. He ran back to his office and told his manager. They both went back to the ditch and called 911. Police arrived at the drainage culvert about 40 feet from Sand Hill Road. The following day, February 16th, a press conference was held. Deputy Chief Jim Johns delivered the news. An autopsy today has determined that the remains of the female discovered in the field are those of Brianna Denison. The official cause and manner of death was strangulation. It is a sexually motivated crime. Police now believed she had been strangled in the house and then her body had been taken outside. She was found wearing only a pair of socks. Under her right knee were 2 pairs of underwear, one pink and one black. Katie said the pink ones were hers, and she didn't even know they had been taken. The owner of the other pair was never identified. DNA was taken from Brianna's body, and it matched the DNA found on the doorknob and from the previous attacks. The spot soon became a memorial, with so many people leaving flowers, candles, and cards. On March 6th, police revealed something significant. This offender had kept the underwear of his victims as trophies, which he would then leave at the scene of his next crime as a calling card. Both pairs of underwear had been deliberately left for officers to find. One officer said the killer was taunting them. The FBI and more than 40 detectives were working around the clock. Hundreds of man-hours were going into finding her killer. The signs around the area that had said "Bring Bree back" now said "Bring Bree justice." Thousands turned out to pay tribute to this beautiful teenager whose life had been taken too soon. There were vigils and memorials as people continued to struggle with their grief. But the weeks continued to pass. The people of Reno were still living in fear, and her killer seemed no closer to being caught. Thousands of tips had come in, but all they needed was one. And finally, they got it. On November 1st, 2008, police received some interesting information. A woman had told her friend that she had found underwear in her ex-boyfriend's truck, and his behavior when asked about it had been extremely odd. Her ex-boyfriend had also moved out of the area suddenly after Brianna was found, even though he had lived there since 2002. He had also sold his truck. He had a history of animal abuse and domestic violence. He had broken a puppy's leg, tried to lunge at someone with a knife, and been abusive to his ex-girlfriend. He had been arrested for felony domestic violence. but no DNA sample had been taken. His name was James Michael Biela. He was 27 years old. James was a construction worker who had formerly been in the Marines and was trained in martial arts. He also knew the campus very well, having worked there on a construction job the previous year. After he was identified, the decision was made to put him under surveillance. What seemed odd was that when he was first spoken to over the phone, James didn't ask what was being investigated. The next day, he met with officers and refused to give a voluntary DNA sample. He said he had been with his girlfriend the day Brianna went missing. Police spoke to the woman in question, and she said that wasn't true. She allowed them to take a DNA sample from the son they shared. Using this, they were able to determine that this child's biological father, James Biela, was almost certainly the same person who had left the DNA on the doorknob. On November 25th, as James went to pick his son up from preschool, he was taken into custody. He was then required to give a sample of his DNA. It was a match. Police issued a statement announcing the arrest of a suspect in the slaying of Brianna Denison. Investigators said DNA evidence gathered from the scene linked Brianna's killer to 3 other sexual assaults on women at or near the campus from October to December 2007. He entered a plea of not guilty. The news was met with somber relief. During the preliminary hearing for the charges of murder, kidnapping, and sexual assault relating to Brianna's case and the 2 other sexual assaults, more than a dozen witnesses testified. One was a forensic pathologist, Dr. Ellen Clark, the county medical examiner. She said the marks on Brianna's neck were consistent with one of the 2 pairs of underwear found with her body, and that they may have been used to asphyxiate her. The 2 other women who had been assaulted also testified. One said she had been attacked in a parking garage next to the campus police station. She identified the man who attacked her as James Biela. The other woman said that while she didn't see his face, she could describe his truck. Gray fibers found on her clothes matched the fibers from inside his truck. James was held without bail. The district attorney had not yet decided whether they would seek the death penalty. James had initially said he wanted to testify, but after talking to his lawyers, he changed his mind. The defense argued that the prosecution was not looking at significant differences within the 3 attacks that would suggest they had been committed by different people. Prosecutors presented testimony from James's former supervisor, John Lamb. Lamb said that on February 15, 2008, after Brianna's body was found that same morning, Biela quit his job, took his last paycheck, and moved to Washington State. Lamb also said that same day, he had talked with Biela about the discovery of the body. I asked him how he felt about her being found, Lamb testified, and his comment was, with some colorful language, she probably had it coming. Then he cracked a smile. The harrowing 3-week trial soon came to an end. After 6 hours of deliberations, the verdict was in. The jury of 7 women and 5 men had selected a foreman to hand down the verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant James Michael Biela guilty of count 1, sexual assault. We, the jury, find the defendant James Michael Biela guilty of count 2, kidnapping in the 1st degree. We, the jury, find the defendant James Michael Biela guilty of count 3, sexual assault. We, the jury, find the defendant James Michael Biela guilty of count 4, murder in the 1st degree of Brianna Denison. We, the jury, find the defendant James Michael Biela guilty of count 5, sexual assault on Brianna Denison. The next phase was for the jury to decide on the punishment, life imprisonment, or death. During the penalty phase, his siblings testified that they had grown up in an extremely abusive and violent household where their father terrorized the family. His lawyers were trying to get him life without the possibility of parole, arguing that his traumatic childhood should be taken into account, as well as the fact that he had no prior criminal record. But this didn't sway the jury. James Biela was sentenced to death. On August 18, 2010, the warrant for James's death was signed by the judge. His sentence would be automatically appealed to the Nevada Supreme Court for review. For Bridget, this sentencing was a victory. When James Michael Biela messed with my little girl, she said, he messed with the wrong family. He messed with the wrong women and the wrong city and state, but he still had to face justice for the other attacks he had committed. 2 months after his death sentence was handed down, Judge Robert Perry sentenced him to life with the possibility of parole for 3 counts of rape and 1 count of kidnapping. The judge said that although he was facing capital punishment, he felt it was necessary to add this sentence to honor his surviving victims. Prosecutor Elliot Sattler said this was needed in case any of his convictions were overturned on appeal. If the capital sentence were to be thrown out, James would still need to serve at least 36 years in prison for these offenses. James's first victim, who was now pregnant, took the stand. She said that although her life was now joyful, that had been overshadowed by the violence he had inflicted. The woman he had attacked at gunpoint in November said, "Mr. Biela, I wish you would look at me now." He refused. "Though you didn't murder me," she said, "you killed the trusting and vivacious woman I was moments before you turned my world upside down." Brianna's family was there for this sentencing to give support to the women who had survived. Even the jury from Brianna's trial attended, even though they didn't have to be there. Being in a trial of this magnitude and importance, one of them said, "We felt it was important to see the process through." In 2016, James was back in court. His lawyers argued that during his trial he had had incompetent counsel. The Nevada Supreme Court denied his motion for a rehearing of the appeal they had denied in April, which had sought a new penalty phase. His lawyer argued that his original attorney should have objected to improper evidence relating to his history. The judges agreed that while the lawyers had erred, barring such evidence would have made no difference to the outcome. There is no reasonable probability, they said, that the outcome of the penalty hearing would have been different if trial counsel had objected and the trial court had excluded the evidence. The jury was faced with a defendant who had engaged in a pattern of violent conduct that had escalated to murder. Out of such an awful tragedy, Bridget was determined to make something positive. Brianna's law became something she would campaign for tirelessly. The law would allow police to take samples of DNA for felony arrests and compare those with DNA from other crimes. "This law, I truly believe, will save lives," she said. "My daughter could very well have been alive today if this law would have been in place." In May 2013, Brianna's law was signed. Now, anybody arrested for a felony charge in the state of Nevada must give a sample of DNA and pay for it to be processed. More tragedy would strike the Denison family when exactly 10 years after Brianna was abducted, her 19-year-old cousin Caitlin went missing. She had told her family she was flying out to Midland, Texas, with a man she had recently met. Caitlin's sister Rachel said, "This isn't like her. We would never go this long without talking. That's why I know something is wrong." She added that when she had last spoken to her, Caitlin had said the man had made her frightened for her life. 7 years later, Caitlin Denison is still missing. Brianna Denison was a vibrant, happy young woman, just 19 years old, full of promise, embracing the possibilities of life ahead. And then, in a single night, all of that was stolen. But what followed in the wake of that unimaginable loss was something powerful. The city of Reno came together. Strangers became search teams. Neighbors became advocates. A community rallied around Brianna's loved ones with fierce, unwavering support. It's that strength, that unity and determination to seek justice that endures. When we remember Brianna Denison, it shouldn't be for the cruelty of what happened, but for the light that she carried. On behalf of the family, Bridget said, on March 29, 1988, Bridget and Jeffrey Denison were given the incredible gift of their daughter, Brianna. On January 20th, 2008, she became the daughter of our entire community. We are grateful for many things. Grateful for the gift of Brianna in all of our lives. Grateful for the joy that she brought us and for the cherished memories of her that are a source of comfort. Memories that give us strength to see beyond our sorrow, sustaining us in spite of our grief. If this case showed you how DNA evidence and community action can bring justice even in the darkest circumstances, subscribe to Classified Crimes. We examine the evidence, honor the victims, and show how the truth refuses to stay buried. Because justice isn't just about catching criminals. It's about remembering those we've lost and making sure their stories change the world for the better.